What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. Today we are talking Nazca Mummies.
Never in the 8 years I've been researching have I mentioned or said the word extraterrestrial. Never. We are talking about humanoid species.
Dude, look at the fingers. Look at the fingers here. That's like the realest. Oh my God.
All right, Vetters, please hit that like button. That really helps out the videos. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers before the end of the year. So most recently, Jesse Michaels put out this really extensive, exclusive documentary about the Nazca Mummies. He went down to Peru, got to see everything. So I've got a lot of clips from that particular documentary. But what's also interesting and why I wanted to wait to make this video is because this interview just dropped with Garry Nolan on the Vinny Adams show. And Vinny asked him about the Nazca Mummies, and Garry gave answers he's never given before about the Nazca Mummies and revealed a lot about how he was contacted to study them and why he ultimately decided not to. And I think what you're going to hear is a little concerning, but look, we're going to cover a lot of things in today's video and kind of get the whole scope, for these Nazca Mummies and where we are today, because you see, these came out a long time ago, right? So look, let's let Jesse explain in his documentary here exactly where the mummies came from and how many different types of Nazca mummies there are.
Okay, so that's the backdrop in which in 2015, a gravedigger named Leandro happened upon a cave with these tridactyl, three-fingered, three-toed, very gray alien-looking mummies.
I was walking along the edge and tripped on the wall, and then it fell apart and I could see this cave full of diatoms.
I started to dig and big clumps began to emerge that when they melted revealed that they were heads and parts of the bodies.
The cave contained over 200 body parts, isolated heads, limbs, and appendages, and in many cases, entire intact bodies. All of the bodies and parts were covered in diatomaceous earth, a desiccant that dried them out and preserved them. And technically, they aren't actually mummies. Many of them still have their organs fully intact inside the bodies. The bodies have a range of carbon dating from 700 years ago to 1800 years ago, mostly overlapping with the Nazca period. There are 3 different dominant body types in the pile of 200 bodies and parts. Number 1, the S-types, these small winged creatures that we're not going to focus too much on in this episode. Number 2, the J-types, or as they're sometimes called, reptilians. These are skinny, 2 to 3 feet tall, oddly geometric or boxy bodies, and their faces look like the aliens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Some even have eggs inside their bellies. We have 25 to 30 of these. The mummies I personally think are most interesting are called the M-types, or hominids. These look like hominid 4 to 5 foot beings. Their organs, tendons, cartilage, and bones fully intact.
And the reason they're not focusing on the S-types is because those are pretty much fakes, hoaxes, which would be a red flag to then continuing to look at the other different mummies they have, right? Let's just start there. Like, let's say you went to a jeweler and you were going to buy some diamonds, and the first one he showed you was fake. But then he's like, oh, no, I got another one. These are real, I promise. Right? That's essentially what happened. So how come one of the S-types, which Jesse doesn't focus on, because again, it's fake, it's hoax probably, right? So not going to focus on that. But within the other ones from the same people, it just seems like, why are we not addressing why that was faked and hoaxed and how how does that affect the rest of the investigation, right? I don't know why that isn't explained a little bit more. But regardless, I find that to be just a red flag for myself. But again, I'm still open-minded on this as far as this goes. So let's continue to let Jesse explain a little bit more about why these mummies may be so important. And don't worry, I have the interview with Garry coming. We just need to cover some of this stuff first.
Now, also at the risk of stirring controversy, I think the J-types are more likely to be fake or reconstructions, maybe homages paid to the real M-types. The llama proteins found on the isolated J-type head are very interesting to me, and admittedly, I just have an instinctive allergic reaction to them given how stylized their faces look. But even then, you have DICOM files showing bones, veins, capillaries, things that are hard to fake. You have eggs inside the bodies of beings like Louisa. And here's where things get weird. You have the fact that the J-type beings look a lot like some other beings in global UFO and alien cases. Take the Russian snow alien case in 2011.
Oh no, the Russian snow case. I have covered this and shown this video that Jesse's about to show here, which I'm going to show a little bit of. This worries me a little bit, but I have looked into this. Our Discord we've gone deep on this, actually, this video. But look, all right, let's hear out Jesse and what he has to say about this video.
So anyways, here's where things connect to this Peruvian case, and where things get weird.
Вот его там нашли, короче, ну, смотри.
Just 1 month later, in that same region of Siberia, 2 Russian guys come upon an alien body in the woods.
What the hell, I think, what the hell is lying there? I don't know.
They filmed the body and uploaded it to YouTube. That video has 12 million views on it. The 2 guys who found this body were taken in by the police, questioned, and apparently confessed to hoaxing it with breadcrumbs, plasticine, and chicken skin.
So, okay, look, I admit that maybe some chicken skin and whatever, it maybe not explain all of that, but, there's so many red flags in that video. But again, it's too hard to determine at the end of the day whether the video is fake or not. There's just not enough data, right? It is literally in the low information zone, and truly there is no way to prove that, but it's all about probability. But I will admit that Jesse makes an interesting point right here about this video.
Again, I think this video should be debunked, but I think it deserves a better debunk. And if you were part of the defense establishment, maybe CIA or FSB or elsewhere, how would you soften the blow on disclosure? You'd say, oh yeah, that video with 12 million views you've already seen. Oops, yeah, that was actually real. That would cause a lot less panic than some new video of a being that they haven't gauged the public's reaction to yet. Gun to my head, I would still say this video is probably fake.
So that is an interesting point that Jesse makes, and that could possibly be true, but maybe not about this video, right? I mean, even Jesse admits, gun to his head, he's still going to say that this video is fake, but maybe there is something similar to that out there in UFO land. Some video that is out there that people think is fake that actually isn't, because the Nimitz video came out way before it was ever released by the New York Times, and I'm sure people thought that was fake, and that turned out to be a real Navy video, right? So I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.
Although it's clear that forensic experts in various countries all seem to think that at least the M-types or hominids are real, we're just not getting a clear sample from the genetics. Because of that, I decided to hit up my buddy Ben Lamb at Colossal Biosciences. From its inception, Colossal was advised by George Church at Harvard, maybe the top geneticist in the world. They've also single-handedly de-extincted the direwolf. They've literally brought it back from ancient DNA samples. So they are gonna run tests on these Nazca mummies. And hey, if Colossal brought the direwolf back from extinction, maybe they can bring one of these beings back too. I'm half joking here. I've seen Jurassic Park and I know how that story ends.
Now, this is huge news if you ask me, right? This is the kind of stuff we need. I'm all for looking into the Nazca mummies, by no means, right? I do want to look into it. And in full transparency, I have tried to interview some of these people before, and Gonzalo Chavez, who's mentioned in this video several times by Jesse Michaels, was trying to help me get some interviews behind the scenes, but unfortunately they just weren't doing it, didn't want to, whatever the reason is. So, when other podcasters or YouTubers get criticized for not covering the Nazca mummies enough, and why is everybody ignoring this, and why this? Well, some of us have tried and just, had the door shut in our face. So what are we supposed to do? You know what I mean? We can only cover it so far. So that stigma that's out there of why aren't we covering it? Why on this? Well, some of us have tried and haven't been able to, right? So I just think some of that criticism needs to slow down a little bit. It's on the Nazca Mummy crew to prove that it's real to us, not the other way around. And we shouldn't be, made to feel inferior because we don't believe it, or, aren't looking into it enough, or this. That's like, just the evidence will come out. It's either real or not. Why is that? Why is it wrong to be skeptical about it or waiting till that evidence comes out? Anyway, whatever. That's just UFO game. But this is a great thing by Jesse, and we need more things like this. And the fact that he's going to get those people involved who help bring back a wolf, right? Like, that's interesting. Now, I'm with Jesse. I don't want to see them bring back these mummies. He's exactly right about Jurassic Park.
Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Are you pro-openness, humanity, and science? Or do you want to be a gatekeeper and keep a lid on this thing? Again, this is Colossal asking for permission to take samples of these bodies from Peru to the US. If that doesn't work out, I will also put up all of the money to personally fly any expert in genetics, any paleoarchaeologist, any proteomics expert to go down to Peru, go to the University of Ica, and study these bodies firsthand.
I think that there are a lot of different steps that need to be taken if we're going to realistically examine the specimens. And that would include, and I hope I'm not going too far afield here, but if these are tridactyl organisms, the DNA here ought to match the DNA here, ought to match the DNA here, and interestingly enough, the DNA is most likely to be preserved in a tooth. And so if all 4 of those, or 5 of those, or more areas match up, then you've got an entity. If they don't, that's not the same organism.
The definition of a grifter is someone who wants to keep these things in a liminal space. They don't want any of these cases collapsed into true or false. I could just make these videos and tell the world that these things are definitely extraterrestrial, which I can't say for certain, and just move on. But I don't want to do that. I want to actually figure out what the hell is going on.
So this is where it gets interesting, and, 2 parts to this clip. One is Jesse talking about he'd fly down some scientists and get that going. Put a pin in that, because Garry Nolan's going to maybe explain why that's just not possible. That's not how it's done, right? So, but put a pin in that. Now let's come back to the last part that he said about grifting, right? And basically, like, you don't want it to be proven true. You don't want it to be proven false. You kind of want it to just lie there in the middle. And what's funny is I've been saying that before even this documentary come out. That's what I've been saying potentially has been happening with the mummies, right? Because if these mummies are sold on the black market, like Jesse Michaels is about to say here in this clip on Joe Rogan, then they have more value or retain their value that you sold them for. If it's sort of ambiguous, are these alien, are these this, are they that, or that, you don't want to prove in one way or the other because you're selling these on the black market.
If this is art, if someone made this, I need to buy one.
Yeah.
Like, you need to tell me how much this costs. I need to put it on my table because you're a genius. If you've made that and you tricked everybody into thinking that that's real, you're a goddamn genius, and you shouldn't just be hoaxing people.
Well,
so then the alternative is that's real. Well, if that's real, that's completely insane.
Joe, fortunately and unfortunately, fortunately for you maybe, but unfortunately for the case, these Waqueros, these gravediggers, are selling some of these things on the black market. And this case is the wild, wild west. It is so...
How much? How much could I get one for?
I've heard 7 figures.
7 figures?
I've heard a lot of money.
And that's kind of my point with the grifting. Maybe that's exactly what's happening, right? They're grifting this because... Again, they're selling them for 7 figures on the black market, right? And they would completely lose their value. And all those people will be upset if that came out that this was a hoax, right? But it's as long as the investigation is continuing, then the value retains on those bodies. Do you see what I mean? I'm not saying that's what's going on. I'm just saying that's a possibility. Even Jesse lays out that that would be a grift.
And I'm just a dude on YouTube with no credentials to make any claims whatsoever. But if you really want to know my opinion, gun to my head, I'm just going to go out and say, I think the M-types are probably real. My guess is the genetics reading Steve Mera got with one female and one male phalange on Maria's body was probably due to human contamination. And Flavio Estrada and the Peruvian Ministry of Culture, I think they're just bad faith actors. I don't trust them at all. And there are really no other solid debunks on this. Very few serious people are looking at this case.
And again, maybe there's a reason for that. That serious people aren't looking at this. Let's listen to Garry Nolan in this most recent interview because he tried to bring some serious, very serious people into the Nazca Mummy investigation. And, you know, that didn't happen. But look, before we even get into that, as Vinny's going to explain here at the beginning, Garry Nolan hasn't seen Jesse Michaels' documentary yet. So
Jesse from American Alchemy just put out this piece on the tridactyl mummies from Peru, and it's brought the conversation back into the sort of zeitgeist, as it were. So I guess, you know, your thoughts would be really interesting on this. And you mentioned previously before we hit record that you'd not seen Jesse's documentary, I suppose you could call it, but
maybe there's something would change if he did see it. But I think when you hear Gary's story, you'll realize I don't think any of that matters. So take a listen.
Are there any positives and, in the same vein, negatives that you see?
Well, I mean, let's just start with the negatives. It's clear that some of the specimens, let's just generally call them that, are constructed. Now, whether they were constructed with intent to deceive or hoax versus were they made in honor of something and then buried alongside, or maybe they have nothing to do and they're just part of some story that's been passed down.
All right, so now let's get into the part I told you to put a pin in, right? And essentially, you know, that no serious people have looked into this, right? Let's let Garry explain how he was contacted by Jaime Maussan to look into this, what he asked for, who he tried to bring in. Just listen to Garry because, again, he's never talked about this, right? So take a listen.
People asked, I saw in your thread many times, you know, have I been asked to study the mummies? And yes, I mean, I probably a few dozen times, and by various people, but by serious people able to actually enact an outcome with the mummies or with money behind it. The first time I was asked, one of the requirements was that every moment would be filmed. And I said, no, I'm not going to be filmed. This is not the Kardashians. That's not how science is done. Sure. My students certainly wouldn't put up with it, and Stanford wouldn't allow it. Anyway, and so that's the first part of that. And second was, I said, look, I need a whole bunch of money, not for me personally. I've got, frankly, plenty of money. And so I'd always like more, but, you know, I can get on. And so the issue was, you know, I estimated, I think online somewhere, about $5 million to do it right, which would be paying for postdoc researchers of various types and then bioinformaticians of various types. And essentially, the first thing we would do is collect all the data that's already known, figure out what's usable, what's good preliminary data that would cause us to go look in a next direction, and not set it aside, but put it aside in a way that said, okay, well, there's all that preliminary data over there. Now let's, based on this, do the next thing that, you know, we should do. And then everything needs to be collated, the instruments used, the methods used, etc., because it's all going to have to go into a peer-reviewed paper where you can't just make stuff up about what the methods were. You can't, well, I think I did this. No, that's not what you can do. And that's not what you will do if you're going to do it properly. So, and it would be probably 3 or 4 different teams of people that would need to be brought in to do it right. And so no one was willing to do it that way. And so I said, no, I won't. I won't do it. I said, there's plenty of good scientists in South America, but they clearly aren't being given the resources they need, nor the power that would allow them to keep results quiet as they're being generated. I mean, I could probably be able to get in the likes of the guys who did the Neanderthal work,
right,
if they felt that I provided them sufficient information that would make it interesting to them and worth their time, and not get caught up in the circus that can be generated around these things. That's the reason why a lot of serious scientists who I know are interested in it, but won't touch it with a 1,000-foot pole because of the antics that go on. I mean, the similar thing happened, I'm just going to be honest, with the bugsphere. Jaime Maussan contacted me soon after he had recovered the sphere, and I said, okay, great. And he called me. He said, can you help? What should I do? And I said, well, you should get a mobile X-ray machine. You can probably find one at a veterinarian. Do you happen to know a veterinarian? Because they would have one for doing X-rays of cows and horses and things. And you need this. And so he literally managed to get it almost the next day, and it sent me some of the first results. And I said, great. Okay, so let's keep this quiet. Let's do this, and this. And now I need it at this angle and at this angle. And he said, okay, great, I'll do that. And then I woke up the next morning, Saturday morning, it was all over Twitter. And I just wrote Jaime, I said, this isn't what I thought we talked about. And his answer was, well, we need to get this information out because someone's going to suppress it. Well, here we are now, 6 months later? And where are we? Nowhere. Maybe Jaime's doing something. I don't doubt his desire, but I said I won't be involved with this now because I can't trust that the information won't be ending up on Twitter the next day before we've had an even chance to determine what it is that is going on.
I mean, these are some huge claims, right? He's trying to bring in some absolutely legitimate people to look into this, and he just doesn't see it very comfortable, and they're not willing to do what he feels is the correct scientific process to study these, right? And he even feels the people down there aren't even getting the right, resources, right? So going back to Jesse's point of he'll fly any person out to study it, well, as Gary's kind of pointing out, that's not how it's done. You don't just fly out. I mean, there needs to be a whole thing, right? So that's kind of a moot thing, maybe. And maybe I'm wrong. And maybe Jesse can explain that a little bit further. And maybe there's, him and Gary can talk, because it sounds like just sending someone down to, quote, study it independently isn't just going to be enough, as Gary put it. And that's why he decided not to work on these or bring the people in that he wants to, because they don't want to touch it. And look what happened to him with the bugsphere, right? With Jaime, right? I mean, these are huge red flags coming from Garry Nolan's perspective here about the Nazca mummies. But regardless, Gary remains open-minded about this, and I can respect that.
I mean, it just sounds like it's just one big complete mess. And rather than sticking on this subject, I suppose my last question would be: to limit any more sort of damage to the credibility of them, what would you ideally like to see, or what do you think academia would like to see the next step be in legitimizing it any further?
Well, I think the anatomists have had their say, and they say that they can't see it, any evidence of construction in the limited number of samples, the large ones, not the little puppet things that got pulled out at the Mexican Congress. That did all the damage necessary to destroy the credibility of anything that came after. The DNA damage, the DNA analysis that I just told you about.
Sure, right.
That would be the one that I think should be done first.
But look, regardless, there's more information going to be coming out about the Nazca mummies, as Jesse explains here on Joe Rogan. There's another documentary coming out that will more explain how they found the mummies, the location of the mummies, where they were, because that to me is the crux of this whole story, is how were they found.
But there are serious problems. I want to caveat all of this, and I don't want to be overly sensationalist about this. If it's a hoax, it's the best hoax ever. Right. It is the best. My friend Michael Mazzola, who kind of rolled the red carpet down, allowed me to even see these things. He's making a video, or making a documentary on this that's coming out this August, and it's called "This Is Not a Hoax." I told him to put in parentheses, or this is the most sophisticated hoax ever, right? Because the DNA testing sucks. There's no signal. The signal to noise ratio sucks on the DNA.
There's something there that's not being told. And everything from that point, right? It's like, but wait a second, let's not forget the beginning. It's like a magician hiding his left hand. How were they found? I think more needs to be looked into that. And I think this new documentary will do that. So whatever, we'll see what happens there. And look, I'll put a website down here for tridactyls.org. You can go check out. You can look at the information yourself. I mean, that is what I recommend, making up your own mind about this. But clearly there's still more work left to be done. And I'll be patiently waiting, but I would be remiss if I didn't admit that there are still some huge red flags about this. One thing in this Jesse Michaels video that I found absolutely mesmerizing was a story from Steven Spielberg that I'd never heard before. So let's just end with this little nugget. This is kind of cool. Take a look.
And it's absurd just how much this being looks like the Nazca Peruvian J-types. And the beings from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a movie that Ronald Reagan watched in the White House and said there's a lot of truth to.
And he said, I want to thank you for bringing E.T. to the White House. We really enjoyed your movie. And then he looked around the room and he said, and there are a number of people in this room who know that everything on that screen is absolutely true. And he said it without smiling. But he said that, and everybody laughed, by the way. The whole room laughed because he presented it like a joke, but he wasn't smiling as he said it.
All right, vetters, let me know what you think down in the comments. That part from Steven Spielberg is fascinating. Never heard that story before, right? But I think in the image, it says E.T., that he watched E.T., not Close Encounters. So, but maybe there's some confusion there. I'm not sure. So he's saying, Jesse Michaels is saying Close Encounters, but the letter they showed on the screen said E.T., that he was talking about E.T., not Close Encounters. Does it make a difference? I don't know, maybe not. But either way, that's a pretty cool story. Links down below to everything. Go check it out. Every day's a gift. Peace.